只有社会主义
Only
才能救中国
socialism could save
只有
China,
中国特色社会
and
主
that
义
only socialism
才
with
能
Chinese
发展中国
characteristics could develop China.
The Belt and Road Initiative. Community with a shared future for humankind. Socialism with Chinese characteristics in a new era. If you've ever felt bewildered by abstract-sounding slogans and proclamations coming out of Beijing, you're not alone. The ability to understand China requires a lifelong dedication.
I have a background in Chinese literature and Chinese history. When I was young, I had an idiom dictionary. Each page teach you one Chinese idiom. Some statistics say Chinese language has more than 50,000 idioms. There's a lot of rich cultural and historical reference in many of them.
And that comes in handy for your job.
Yeah, it definitely
Interpreting the Chinese Communist Party's concepts and ideas and how they might get lost in translation, but with your help, not.
I think Chinese Communist Party has a strand of the grand tradition of Marxist and Leninist theory. So it came back to the leader, try to be sophisticated.
Some of the slogans can be so grand and long, even the experts can stumble.
新时代中国特色社会主义 Where does Xi Jinping? Oh my God, it's too long, so that's why it's like...
Even you get it wrong.
Yeah.
Chinese is a perfect example of a language that can test your ability to put together a linguistic jigsaw. Ancient semantic fragments, bonded with an elevated rhetorical style from a more recent past, lend the rulers of today the gravitas to lead into the future. Only, the message is often lost on the outside world. Join us as we wander around linguistic peaks and political whirlpools in our attempt to interpret China. I'm Krasi Ivanova-Twig, and this is the Global Jigsaw from BBC Monitoring, where we look at the world through the lens of its media, exploring the narratives, the propaganda, and the disinformation.
Радио Tehran.
Мы не вторгались на территорию Украины.
Western countries are not the international community. That era has finished.
조중 두당 두 나라 최고 영도자 동지들께서는
Back in January, Marco Rubio, the newly appointed US Secretary of State, held his first phone call with his Chinese counterpart Wang Yi.
外交部长王毅应约同美国国务卿卢比奥通电话。
The conversation attracted attention, and not just because of its news value. Rubio explained to US TV host Megyn Kelly what happened.
The game that they play, number one, is they put out an English translation and they put out a Chinese translation, and they don't always overlap.
Our China media analyst Tom Lam explained the phrase Wang Yi used and how it was translated.
Wang Yi told Rubio, 好自为之. It's a very common Chinese idiom. It originates from the ancient Chinese text, 淮南子. Its original meaning was something like prefer doing things by oneself. So it was originally an advice for a ruler who does not employ capable people, but prefers to handle things oneself. Its meaning gradually shifts from advising others to be prudent and cautious, but also have an implicit warning about some danger or some consequences ahead. So in the context of the phone call between Wang Yi and Rubio, in the official readout of the Chinese Foreign Ministry, the phrase translated as, I quote, I hope you will act accordingly and play a constructive role for the future of the people of China and the US. State news agency Xinhua, in its English language edition, translated as, I quote, make right decisions. So you can see in the English translation is a bit moderate. And they kind of omit the context of this idiom.
So there's an implied warning.
It could be, if you don't do that, something bad would happen. If you don't study hard, you will fail the exam, that sort of thing. It was the Chinese state media saying that, oh, Wang Yi warned Rubio in that phone call, you better behave or something would happen.
Rubio later explained he would have offered a different response had he known.
The translator that was on the call did not say anything to me that I felt was over the top. But then they like to play these games. They put out these translations where it says one thing in English and then they use a different term in Mandarin. So he was warned not to overstep himself. They never said that. And if they had, I would have told them, well, I would say the same to you. Don't overstep either.
Did the Chinese side offer any explanation about the use of this phrase? And has it been used before at all in diplomatic language?
China has not really offered any explanation, but it's like such a common idiom that people would instantly get the idea. And also, it's not the first time. For example, in 2021, then Foreign Ministry spokesperson Jiao Lijian, whose combative style earned him the nickname Wolf Warrior, warned Japan to 悬崖勒马, which is another Chinese idiom, means rein in the horse at the edge of a cliff. Pull back before it's too late. He also warned Japan to 好自为之, which is the same warning to Rubio. So he was referring to Japan's stance on issues like Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and Taiwan. 好自为之 was also used when Beijing warned South Korea and the UK to act prudently on issues concerning China's core interests. In the English translation, it's a bit moderate, and the domestic audience would say, oh, China is saying warning.
So basically, you better watch it. Has there been any commentary from the media on this kind of diplomatic language?
After the Rubio call, blogger Yu Yuan Tantian, who is affiliated with the national broadcaster CCTV, said that Wang's usage of the phrase showed the cleverness of Beijing. He said it has both the demeanor of a great power and a stern reminder to Rubio that if the US insists on anti-China stance, it would have to bear the consequences. Rubio, before he took the office as US Secretary of State, was the senator from Florida, really vocal on Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Xinjiang.
These practices of the Chinese Communist Party in Xinjiang is one of the world's largest human rights tragedies.
So he had been sanctioned by Beijing twice.
联邦参议员卢比欧、克鲁兹、霍利。
Tom, when you're doing your job monitoring media and official statements, and when you hear this phrase, knowing all this context, you must kind of feel, okay, well, this is China being a little bit more assertive than the kind of the usual diplomatic, perhaps bland language that they use on other occasions. Do you think this ambiguity was accidental or intentional?
Oh, it's definitely intentional. Chinese media and Hong Kong media and Taiwanese media are saying that, oh, Wang Yi used this phrase, 好自为之. You can see the differences in Chinese original meaning and the English translation are much more watered down, giving impression that China is willing to talk, is being friendly. But for people who understand, they would think it's a very strong warning to the US. And to Chinese-speaking audience is basically to boost this kind of nationalistic sentiment. And this loss in translation given China a room to present a different image to domestic and international audience.
This is interesting about using this ambiguous phrase to kind of address domestic audience, wink, wink, you know what we mean, an international audience sounding more diplomatic. It sounds like killing two birds with one stone. Let's look at another example, and it's a famous one, and that shows how Chinese, when translated into a foreign language, can perhaps lose its original meaning, but also its poetic ring.
The Belt and Road Initiative, first proposed by Chinese President Xi Jinping in 2013.
The famous Belt and Road Initiative. What is that about? We're still baffled what it means.
It's called 一带一路, which means one belt, one road.
显示今年上半年中国一带一路倡议下的项目经
They changed it to Belt and Road Initiative. I guess it's not too much better. But 一带一路, what the belt means, the Silk Road economic belt, and the road means the 21st century maritime Silk Road.
Made up of an overland belt, the Silk Road economic belt, spanning Central and Southern Asia and Europe, And a maritime road.
So, confusingly, the belt bit refers to the roads on land, and the road bit refers to the sea routes.
Yeah. Hong Kong media used to joke about this one belt because 一带一路 sounds like on one side you are wearing and on the other side you are taking it off. Some comedians say that it's like describing a woman wearing a bra on one side and expose her breast on the other side.
And of course, the numbers are very significant. The Chinese love numbers. 100 flowers blooming.
Yeah.
One road, one
I think
belt.
一带一路 is quite in line with the Chinese Communist Party, preferring to use numbering in their political slogan. Their 100 flower blooming was referring to an era that the CCP would allow dissidents to speak freely. And after they spoke critical of the government, the CCP turned around and prosecute them. And then there's a lot of other political slogans. For example, the 20th CCP National Congress is called 20大, which means 20 great, which doesn't make much sense. And also the famous one for Hong Kong is called One Country, Two Systems.
Chinese leaders may be partial to numbers and idioms, but there's another factor that contributes to their signature rhetorical style.
I think Chinese Communist Party has a separate strand of tradition. The leader try to be sophisticated because they have the grand tradition of Marxist and the Leninist theory. When Mao came to power, he had the Maoism, which is world revolution, first world, second world, third world, that sort of political slogans and thought.
由他们去决定，就是说他们要打独救，就打独救。
And that's why all the Chinese leaders after him has come up with their own personal thought. Deng Xiaoping, we had the Deng Xiaoping thought, which is socialism with Chinese characteristics.
只要一改变人民生活，肯定会下降。谁要改变现行？
And then his successor, Jiang Zemin, would have the 3%.
是对马克思列宁主义、毛泽东思想和对继承和发展。
And then his successor, Hu Jintao, would have the theory called scientific outlook of development. And then Xi Jinping had the Xi Jinping thought, but the full name of it is called Xi Jinping Thought on Socialism with Chinese Characteristics in a New Era. 新时代中国特色社会主义 Where does Xi Jinping? Oh my God, it's too long, so that's why it's like...
Even you get it wrong.
Yeah. So the full name is 习近平新时代中国特色社会主义思想, which is very long and mouthful.
There's another example that keeps popping up, and it's translated in our work in monitoring. Community with a shared future for humankind, another kind of mouthful phrase. And it's to do with China seeing itself as the leader of the global south in a supposedly multipolar world, where China being Zhongguo, the Middle Kingdom, is this kind of superpower magnet attracting these constellation of nations. It's a bit vague in English, though.
Yeah.
What's in the original?
Chinese leader want to present themselves as a thought leader and a philosophical king. Like the Xi Jinping thought, he coined his name in the thought because he wanted to position himself as the same level as Mao. And since Mao and Deng, we haven't seen a concrete worldview. And Xi came up with this idea to share this destiny of mankind with other countries.
人类命运共同体，中国发展离不开世界。
It shows the ambition of Xi wanted to cement his legacy as the same level as Mao, as well as a worldview that could be competing with the US. But somehow, I guess, when you're being too abstract and too sophisticated, it's hard to attract audience beyond its country borders.
So they can congratulate themselves on being smart and sophisticated. But when the message is lost in translation, it kind of defeats the purpose of the communication, really.
At the end of the day, what Chinese leader value is authority and legitimacy. And so the nature of the CCP is not a democratic party, and it doesn't need to communicate with the people.
It doesn't need to win voters.
Their intention, I think, is more to present itself as the leader of the country as well, maybe even the world, as they come up with these broad, grand, abstract philosophical ideas of the shared destiny, even though it doesn't have much substantial meaning.
You are listening to The Global Jigsaw from BBC Monitoring. If we look at the building blocks of these phrases, they tend to be made out of 4 characters, and they're very idiomatic in nature. And this is the thing about Chinese language. It has so many such idioms, and it all goes back to the ancient language. And there are these wonderful expressions, which is one reason why studying Chinese is so much fun. Like admiring flowers while riding a horse, which means basically mission impossible. You can't pay attention to the details. Or playing the lute to a cow, 对牛弹琴, which is very similar in spirit to the biblical casting pearls before swine. So these 4 character idioms, they are very important kind of linguistic scaffolding of the concepts we are talking about today. Would you agree?
Yeah, definitely. I think some statistics say Chinese language has more than 50,000 idioms. A lot of them actually came from ancient texts, such as 史记, which is the first history text in Chinese history written around 9 BCE. And then they came from historical events, some of them being important historical figures. And so there's a lot of like a rich cultural and historical reference in many of them. And people like to use them in their literacy works to show them, like, I'm educated and...
To show your linguistic prowess.
Yeah, and it's also very good when it's used to make things a bit ambiguous to get the poetic feeling. And in international relations, the ambiguity also can use as a tool to maneuver, as you can see in Wang Yi Rubio case.
What you just described, this kind of ambiguity, reminded me to my favorite teacher in ancient Chinese, who was saying in order to translate the ancient Chinese text, you've got to meditate. This kind of translation work is meditation. It's almost this kind of philosophical thinking process to get the meaning, to feel it almost. And it strikes me it's an incredible contrast, really, when you compare this kind of level of sophistication to the language that Donald Trump uses, which is the exact opposite, kind of very simple, almost childlike, but very effective in terms of pressing the right buttons in the intended audience. But with the Chinese diplomatic language, you almost see this effort to go back to the ancient script. It's like some kind of a stamp of legitimacy, this level of sophistication and nuance.
I think it's because of the stark differences between the Chinese and American system. In the Chinese authoritarian system, the more sophisticated the leader looks, the more legitimacy and authority they could project. Whereas in the US political system, because it's a democratic system, you need to connect to the voters, especially when you're a populist figure. You need to use your language as simple as possible. That results in a very different kind of way of using language in their political messaging in the US and China.
Very different. But then, when we look at how things are translated into Chinese, and this is another fun example from my university days when I was studying Chinese, not only the original meaning is not lost, but extra meaning is added. And the result can be really fun. If you take Coca-Cola, and the way it's, well, not translated, transliterated, Coca-Cola, but there's an effort to create this meaning, and it's tasting good and bringing joy. Even the original doesn't have that. Or vitamin Wei Sheng Su, which means a substance to preserve life. These are not simple transliterations. They sound close to the original, but they also convey something new. So a lot of thought goes into these.
Yeah, I think the 可口可乐 example is a very good one because if you hear that in Chinese, you would definitely want to buy. I think it's kind of in line with the traditional Chinese principle of translations. Back in the late 19th century, when a lot of Chinese intellectuals were hungry for new Western ideas, they came up with the three principles of translation. 信雅达. 信 means faithfulness, 雅 means elegance, and 达 means expressiveness. So faithfulness means like translation should be faithful to their original meaning. Elegance means the translation must be aesthetically pleasing. And the expressiveness means the translation should be intelligible and in accordance with the language rules of the original text. 维生素 is a good example because it's like preserving life. It's a very good translation, I would say, in line with the 信雅达 principles.
But this kind of reminds me, and it must come from the same idea of what's at the bottom of the majority of Chinese characters, which are idiophonograms, meaning one component of this character has the clue about the meaning and the other component has the clue about the sound. So this kind of amalgamation of meaning and sound. Like, if we have an example, the character for mother, Ma, has woman on the left-hand side and horse on the right. So the woman has the clue that this is a mother and the horse is just the sound. Unless there is a hint that women are supposed to work as hard as horses.
Yeah, I think the Chinese language is a very interesting language because there are a lot of ideograph and pictograph. Ma, which is the one that you just suggest. I think the pronunciation came before the creation of the character. When there's a baby, ma, 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 it's like similar to any other language. Ma is kind of related to mother because the baby could pronounce when they first speak. That's why they put the ma, like the horse.
Like the horse, but it's not very flattering.
It's not. Actually, there's some feminists saying that a lot of Chinese character with negative meaning has the 女, which is female, in it. For example, 奴, which means slave, is a woman with 又, mean like again. So 奸, which means evil, it also have like a 女字旁, which is a female character.
So all these negative concepts have got woman in there.
Yeah, some feminists actually say that there should be a reform to correct this perceived sexist undertone in this character. But I think it wouldn't be easy because some of these characters have been used for more than 3,000 years.
But there's something else that I came across. This desire to, instead of translate, stick to the Chinese, pinyin, the Chinese transliteration system for certain things. Like the Year of the Dragon, the Chinese became reluctant to translate this wonderful mythical Chinese beast into this horrible thing called dragon.
Yeah, I think in recent years, we see a lot of Chinese media using the word 龙, which is the pronunciation of the Chinese dragon, instead of dragon, which is usually seen as evil. Dragon is the one who should be killed because they would breathe fire, and then Chinese dragon never hurt anyone. So it's a kind, majestic, mythical animal that represent China because Chinese people call themselves the descendant of the Long. So they didn't want to associate with the Western dragon, which are evil.
So this is an attempt to avoid this process of losing the meaning in translation. And they're suggesting we're not going for the Year of the Dragon, it's the Year of the Lung. Have there been other examples like that?
Yes. In recent years, China started using the Mandarin pronunciation of Tibet, Xizang, to refer to the Tibetan majority autonomous region because Tibet is a Western translation firstly, and then it has a colonial undertone, and at the same time, I think China wants to proclaim its sovereignty over the region. So that's why they're using the Chinese pronunciation Xizang to replace the Western name, which is Tibet.
During the visit, she met with representatives of officials aiding Xizang's development, regional leaders, and veteran comrades. He also met with representatives from the police, legal workers, patriotic religious figures, and monastery management committees.
So by giving it a Chinese name, Tibet is now China.
Exactly, yeah.
How tricky must it be for you when you're doing this job to kind of come across these really ambiguous, full of nuance phrases, and you kind of almost feels like you have to provide lots of linguistic advisories and lots of footnotes as you go along?
I think it's actually the interesting part of the job because sometimes Chinese official readout or political messaging could be very dull and repetitive. And it's only when they use this ambiguous language or some ancient Chinese phrases or idiom that we could read between the lines to see what the subtle meanings behind or what's the intention when they use these phrases. We bring a little bit of joy in our daily routine of reading Chinese documents and statements.
Thank you to Tom Lam for guiding us through the linguistic labyrinth of the Chinese Communist Party. The team behind this episode was exec producer Krista Shaturi, technical producer Elchin Suleimanov, and me, Krasi Ivanova-Twig. The man at the sound desk was Martin Appleby. Thank you from all of us for listening. And if there's another example that has tickled your curiosity that we could shed light on, please get in touch. Our email address is theglobaljigsaw, all one word, @bbc.co.uk.